Welcome to the We Are All Dying podcast. I'm your host, Jenna Goodhand, and my hope is that through these conversations, we become more comfortable, competent, and confident talking about death. On today's show, I have a conversation with Kevin Cahill, and we talk about the seasons of life, about loss, and about facing our own mortality. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope this inspires you to have conversations about death in your own life. Welcome to the show, Kevin. I'm so grateful to have you.
I'm incredibly honored to be here with you this morning.
I've had a chance to look a little bit at some of the things that you've publicly shared about your life, and I'm really grateful that you're willing to open up and share some of your experience on these topics that a lot of people do experience, but we don't hear about it. But it's going to affect a lot of us in our lives, if not all of us, when it comes to death. We all do die, and we all do have people around us that unfortunately die as well. I like to start this conversation by going back in time a little bit and seeing, for the guest, what was one of your first experiences with death, or when death sort of came into your life as a thing you now realized was a possibility?
What I always love about interviews and podcast recordings is usually within the hour before something pops into my head that I've completely forgotten about. And the first experience for myself, I was 12 when my grandmother passed away. And the reason why that popped into my head is I didn't have a suit, and mom took me to go buy a suit. And the tie that came with that suit, I still own to this day. And I still wear it. And I've written about the funeral tie and everything that that tie represented. And it's one of the most abstract ties I have in my wardrobe. And, it really planted the seeds, because from there, my father-in-law, then my mother, then my father, and then facing my own challenges and near-death experiences in a car crash and then cancer myself, all of those elements dotted along the journey really helped to soften me, make me more compassionate, make me more empathetic, and really take all of the experiences, witness how everyone really played off of those experiences, and then to shape my own destiny.
Wow, there's a lot in there.
Yes, I think I probably gave the trailer for our whole conversation.
All right. So I love this tie, this funeral tie that has sort of kept its significance throughout your life. And so even just touching on that, like when someone in your life has died, or even your own journey of facing your own death, what are some other items or places or experiences that you've sort of identified as holding a spot for those that you've lost, or as I don't know, sort of like significant to your own journey? Are there other items that you sort of hold on to or engage with?
Yes, there's one. Right around the same time that my grandmother passed away, it was Thanksgiving weekend, and mom was busy in the kitchen making Thanksgiving dinner. Probably started at 4 o'clock in the morning with putting the bird in for 18 hours, which is what she usually did. And dad was still sleeping, and I was still in bed myself. And all of a sudden, we heard this massive crash and squawking, and it was coming from mom and dad's bedroom. And so mom rushed from the kitchen, I rushed from my bedroom, opened the door. Dad, still pretty much sleeping, and a ruffed grouse, which is this big bird, had flown through the double pane window, got itself caught in the vertical blinds, and basically was falling to its death because it had broken his neck. Dad woke up, took up the bird, broke its neck, killed it, and then went and got it stuffed. And then this bird, for the rest of my teenage years, it sat on top of the TV. And when I opened up my first office back in 2006, dad gave it to me as a gift for my office. So I've actually had that bird ever since, I was probably 12 or 13 years old. And it's always been positioned in a place where, it's usually looking to the kitchen. It's always watching me. And it was the creepiest thing as a teenager. But now in my adult lives, it's one of the things I most cherish. And anyone that walks into the house, they'll see the bird and they'll ask the story. And I have to obviously tell the story. Dad was never a hunter. We were never hunters in any way, shape, or form. And that's the only time we've been able to capture something. So he had to have his stuff. But it's a memory. And the symbolism behind the rough grouse, again, regardless of what individuals believe and the symbolism in the universe, but it is that symbol to me that he's always there with me. It's a physical symbol that he's standing, beside me. But at the same time, it's also that reminder of who he was as an individual and what he brought to this earth when he was alive.
Wow, what a great story. And what a great way to honor it and have like such a physical, a lot of times people say, oh, I keep like a little coin in my pocket, but this is like right front and center. I love it. That's great.
And
Um,
kind of creepy.
totally kind of creepy. Yeah. And so, do you remember when you were 12 and your grandmother died? Do you remember how that experience was for you? Do you remember what your parents told you about it, or how you sort of navigated that first significant loss in your life?
So we were all born and raised Roman Catholic, and the looking back over 40 some odd years of that journey, um, there's so many symbolism in the dying process that's held within that tradition. And a lot of the major religious traditions of the world all have very significant symbolisms and significant traditions that seem to be forgotten in this secular world. And the process imprinted from a very early age, the symbolism of dying, and the Jesus story really showing us that death is an illusion and there is no finality to anything. And over the gravesite, the concepts of from dust to dust, that's always stuck with me. Because, and even now in what I do and what I speak about in the process of change, everything in the cosmos and everything in nature is really pointing to this circular pattern that, birth, renewal, death, it's a constant cycle. And we never get out of this world alive. And that was that beginning that, and of course, being Irish Catholic adds into it was a party. It wasn't a mourning. It wasn't, oh my God, the world is ending type of a process for anybody. Yes, there was emotion and yes, there was tears, but there was also that true celebration of life. My grandmother was almost 90 years old. She lived a very full, meaningful, and impactful life. And that was that first element in my own journey where, you're there listening to the stories, and you're listening to the elements of that person's life and how that person touched another person, or how that person was impacted by another life. And that really led me on that journey that we're here for something greater. And it's tough because everyone deals with death and loss and suffering and trauma in their own particular way. And there's no right way, there's no wrong way. But I do have to believe that there is an easier way than what we as humans allow ourselves to do.
Hmm. So thinking about, your own experiences with grief, witnessing the grief of others, the fact that you do talk about this quite a bit, so I'm sure it comes up in your conversations more than most people. Where are some places you think that grief is, I guess, being stuck or held or not allowing people to kind of move forward? Are there thoughts, feelings, beliefs that some of us just seem to get attached to within the grief process that you think are challenging us or making it harder for us to see some of the more beautiful and accepting parts of death?
There's so many, and to really start at the core, all change is loss, whether it's good change, whether it's bad change. Getting a promotion is a change, and that also represents a loss of an old job. Going through a divorce or a death or a disability, that is change. And all change needs to be grieved. And we, as a species, especially in North America, do not take the time to let the emotions flow. We are focused on swifter, stronger, higher, push through, get over it, constantly moving forward. But all systems of life, every single thing, not only on this earth, but in the heavens and the stars and the planetary aspect, everything is circumambulating for key questions. How do you prepare for change? How do you go through suffering? How do you find joy out of that suffering? And then how do you mature and serve? And if you do not go through all four stages, and it doesn't necessarily have to be linear, but the universe has this magical way of throwing you back into the shit pile and challenging you and testing you. And no matter who I speak to, the trials and tribulations they've gone through, they all might be different, but there's always a very similar theme. There's always a similar pattern to what they're experiencing. And I find that unless you get out of your own way and allow and surrender, life is very difficult. And life will keep you stuck until you figure out how to get out of your own way. Much like nature, right? We are so blessed, you in London, me here in Guelph, a little bit further east. We have these 4 amazing seasons that not everywhere on earth experiences, but we are told on a regular basis, come September and October, that death is right around the corner. We are going to show you, and I'm getting universal shivers all through talking about this. We're going to show you the most magical, colorful display you have ever seen right before we die. And we are going to go into this dark, cold, desolate period. But then on the other side of it, there's going to be a newness. And right now, right, there's this newness, there's this birth everywhere. The tree outside of my house is finally in full leaf color. And the robin has 3 eggs in the nest outside my front door. And there's, love them or hate them, there's baby geese everywhere. And that's that symbol that we went through, 3, 4, 5 months of winter to get to this point. And if nature is telling us this story, why can't we step out of our own way and realize that nature is also telling us about this pattern through our own story, through our own journey, right? I hear it so often, right? Is, the relationship ended and everything is horrible and my life is over. But then there's these children that came out of that relationship. And the metaphor I like to use is you can cut open an apple and count the seeds, but you'll never be able to count the apples produced from those seeds. So we're so focused on the future. We're anxious about the future. We're scared or angry about the past. And we forget about this beautiful moment that we're in. And for me, it was, 30 some odd years of the universe constantly beating me over the head with these lessons. And I remember that moment in 2015 when the oncologist said I had cancer, and I just looked up to the heavens and I actually said in the office, I get it. I surrender. I'm getting out of my own way. And the fascinating thing is when you get out of your own way, much like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, that yellow brick road is going to present itself one brick at a time, and it'll lead you. And anytime you go off the path, something is going to knock you back and put you onto the right path again.
With that awareness, right? To see the path when it's there. So what were some of the things that you were getting in your own way about?
It all had to do with, the American
Mm.
dream, the big house, the fancy car, the big bank account, the expensive suits, the leading a life that I thought was what I was supposed to, until I realized that I had to lead the life that I was meant to live. And it has nothing to do with what I want or what I expect of myself. It's whatever is going to present itself. And there's, so many, life is not this straight line from A to Z. It's this constant spiral that's going to continue to bring us back to the exact same spot. It looks different until we learn that lesson to be able to move on to the next experience and the next challenge.
Yeah. So before your diagnosis, you lost a significant number of important people in your life. How how did I mean, and they might have been in different situations. So I recognize that every death is different, even in, instantaneous death and long prolonged disease are very different experiences for us who lose those people. What were some of the lessons that you learned? And maybe you didn't see them at the time, but then when you had that sort of like wake up, you kind of added them to your personal, Bible of how to live and grieve.
The lesson through all of them was surrender, acceptance, and faith. And faith is such a heavy term for so many people. And when I refer to faith, is it's not because along my own journey, like all good Catholics, I fell away from the church, and I don't consider myself to be religious at all, but it's very spiritual. And a big part of that came from the privilege of being able to read and study the major world religious texts, not just focused on one. And I think about my father-in-law at the age of 52, cancer, fought. The and we have a mutual connection that just passed away this week. And the words that are used so often, warrior, and I'm going to beat this, and I'm going to fight it, and I'm not going to give up, but we don't get out alive. And I don't truly believe that that is the right nomenclature to use in any life situation, because whatever you resist persists. And so with my father-in-law, fighter, and the people that were left with a big burden of grief and anger. And why, where is the God that would allow this to happen? And it took me, probably 10 years. And again, everyone has different versions of what a God is, or a higher power, or what the universe. But for my particular purpose, I'm just going to say God. I do believe that God is standing in the darkness and the shadows with us, waiting for us to find the light, to find the joy. And my father-in-law was a brilliant man. He was a hero to many. And I celebrated that. I did not choose to get into the anger and the regret story. And then a year later, my mom, at the age of 62, it's a fascinating story of how this actually came to the lead up to it. But we went to Ireland for a wedding, and for the entire 2 weeks, she kept saying it was. We had a week before going to the wedding, and then a week after, and the wedding was near this tourist attraction in Bunratty in Shannon, Ireland, and she kept saying, "Kevin, we have to go to Bunratty. We have to go to Bunratty. We have to do the medieval dinner at Bunratty. We have to go." And being the planner and knowing that we would be able to get to the theme park, but we wouldn't be able to do dinner. And then the next 7 days, Kevin, we have to, next time you come to Ireland, you have to go to Bunratty. You have to do the dinner. You can't not do this in Ireland. And we flew back to Canada. She flew home. And 6 weeks later, her and my dad went back to Ireland. And their first day of travel was at Bunratty Castle for the medieval dinner. And the minute she walked up the stairs and sat down, she had a massive heart attack and died.
Wow.
At Bunratty Castle in Ireland. But now, so here's two parents in a year. They were a year and 10 days apart. One fought, where my mother, she retired early from the government. She retired at 52. She traveled the world. And she died at her most favorite place in the world, her Disney World that she had been to, I think, 7 times. And it took about 10 days to get the body back to Canada. And that whole experience was divine. It was surreal because everything, you could not have scripted her death any better for her. And so a few years go by. I had a car accident in January of 2008. I still look at pictures and don't know how I survived. But then my father was diagnosed with cancer. And that first year, so he was diagnosed in December of 2008. And so for the entire year of 2009, I undertook to read the Bible cover to cover because I thought my dad was a religious person. And we lived 5 hours away. I'm from Ottawa. And I thought that if I read the Bible every day, it would give me something to talk about with him. And it was fascinating because reading that book is just it's 66 chapters written by 42 authors over a period of 2,000 years, written by real people having real experiences at real times. And unfortunately, an entire religious system took advantage of that and collected whatever they wanted, and we were focused on versitis and whose verses are better than whoever else's verses. But the whole book is a collection of lamentations and people struggling with loss and identity and who they are as a people that are being oppressed by another group of people. And all of those stories, some left me happy, sad, angry, questioning. But then at the end of the day, I realized that although I did that to connect with my father, it was all about me. It all went from my own journey. And so when my father eventually passed, it was a journey for him where it was acceptance and faith. And I've lived a good life. I'm going to get out of my own way. And we that were left on this earth after he passed away were able to go forward a little easier and a little more loving and a little more capable of being able to handle this journey called life, because he taught us that fighting life isn't going to do anything. And my father was a man, grade 6 education, farmer, alcoholic from the time he was 16. He sobered up, and then 3 years later, I was born. And then 3 years after that, he was crushed by an elevator because he was an elevator mechanic and disabled my entire life. And his entire journey was accepting and allowing whatever will be. And so when my own diagnosis came, the oncologist, starts, this is the treatment plan, this is how we're going to fight. I'm like, no, I'll have the surgery, but I have no interest in chemo or radiation. And the oncologist looked at me like I had 18 heads because I was crazy for not doing this. But that was my own choice. I did not want to fight. I wanted to allow. And who knows what the future will bring. But it's that message for my own son that when you struggle and when life is seemingly unfair, as all of the mystics and the leaders through time, the thought leaders through time would say, is get out of your head, go immerse yourself in nature, and the solutions will come to you and you will be guided.
So much insightfulness in there to think back on. I'm looking forward to listening to that again, applying it to many areas of my life. One thought I had was, I find that it's so hard to know what to say when someone is diagnosed with cancer. And depending on their diagnosis, it could be different. But one of the things that I've often regretted, and it's the only category in my life, is not knowing what to say and not knowing when to say something. And our mutual friend, actually, I reached out recently, and I don't think she ever had a chance to see my message. And I have this feeling of like, I waited too long to say something, but I didn't know what to say. And so, having gone through your own experience, being diagnosed with cancer, like, what can a friend say? Like, I know that it could vary depending on the friendship and the relationship, but it's important to show people, I think, that you love and care about them. And words sometimes don't carry what you want. I know that offering to help doesn't always ease anything because you're in your own space, and thinking of something that someone else can do for you is an extra thing to do. So what can we say? What can we do when someone is diagnosed with cancer and it's such an unknown of what's to come from that experience?
And I think with everything you just said, we have this desire for perfectionism. We feel like we need to be right. But life is not about being right. Life is messy. Life is confusing. Life is filled with unknowns. And we're on this rock that's been around for billions of years, hurtling through space at a ridiculous speed, constantly moving forward. And yet somehow we think that what we do in this particular moment is going to make, we have to get it right in order for it to make a difference. After Dad died, I wrote an article, a blog about, and I think the title was "Don't Tell Me You Know How I Feel." And to me, that was a witness of being at so many funerals. And, I spent 14 years in the financial industry, and I went to a lot of funerals, and I heard a lot of stories where people would make it about themselves. Oh, I'm so sorry, so-and-so died. I lost this person and this person and this person, and I've got this disease, and, my cat has a limp and my dog has gout, right? Like, I heard all of it. And that really, as an observer of humanity, it was fascinating. But I've come to learn over that period of time that the majority of us hate, and cannot stand silence, because sitting in silence forces us to listen to our own thoughts and our own voice. And most of us are not very kind to ourselves. And so we fill up the space with noise. And I experience this. So my son is 15, turning 16. He's lived a very different life than most of his peers because he's lived alongside me. But one of the things is he's come to realize that the individuals who never stop talking, that are constantly making noise, are so, they're hurt on the inside and they're very broken on the inside. And the noise is to cover up their own hurts and hangups. So in your question, and I say this to anyone who has experienced a death or a disease or a disability, the simple words are of, I have no idea what you're going through, but I'm here in any capacity. That doesn't, there's nothing heavy about that. There's nothing, we so many of us want to fix things, or we want to make casseroles, or we want to donate or run or do whatever. But in my challenges that I've experienced, the people who have just sat in silence, and there's a speaker, this just came to me, that I once heard, I think it was probably back in 2006. And for the life of me, I can't think of his name, but he was a former football player. And he told the story of a mother and a young daughter. And the young daughter was late getting home from school. And the mother was, this is obviously probably back in the day before cell phones and before technology where we could track our children. And the mother was getting angry and upset and, storming around the house because the daughter was late. And eventually the daughter came home and the mother just tore a strip off the daughter. Where were you? How come you were late? You should have been home by now. And the daughter responded that her friend, let's say Lucy, dropped her toy and it broke. And so the mother responded, so in an angry, condescending tone, so you were late because you were helping your friend pick up the pieces? No, Mom, I'm late because I sat with her while she cried. Mm-hmm. And that story really always is stuck with me, because that's the power of just sitting in silence. Mm-hmm. And I say to those that I work with that, sometimes all you need to be is a conduit for their emotion. But as long as, we don't hold on to their emotion and we learn to release it. And I think that's a challenge in this life, is we're not taught how to release emotion. We hold on to it. And if we hold on to other people's emotions, then that's going to affect us as well. And, I think about so many times, because of my focus on change and my focus on the process, when I hear people tell me the stories of, their spouse cheated on them, or they just got diagnosed, or they're claiming bankruptcy, in my head, and I've learned not to say this publicly to them because they don't like it, but in my head, I think about how excited I am for them, that something new is going to be birthed as a result of this disaster. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if they'll see it in this lifetime. But I've watched that journey over the last 2-3 years, I think it's been. And that experience will change many people. And it sucks that we all, no matter how many books you read of these stories, no matter how many motivational speakers will talk about, they were living in the gutter of downtown Toronto, alcoholic, nothing. And then all of a sudden, like a light from above, they decided to make a phone call and change their life around. And they've gone on to do wonderful and amazing things. We focus so much on the accomplishment that we forget about the struggle and the near death, or the suicide attempt, or the being abandoned and having nobody. But that's where it starts. That's the gift. That is life. That's the suffering and trauma and pain is the price of admission for life. And I've never met anybody who has gone through life without experiencing something. And it's a Hindu or a Buddhist parable, and parable of the mustard seed. And it was a woman who had lost her child and grieving and wanted to go see the sage of the community to be fixed. And the sage said something along the lines of, I will help you, but go and find a jar of mustard seeds from a home that has not experienced pain. So the lady went away, and no matter what house she went to, she heard the story. She heard the pain and the trauma that they had gone through, but then this is what they're doing now as a result of it. And that brought her comfort, and that brought her peace. And I think that the sharing of the stories and the sharing of, I've been in the gutter. And yes, you're going to be in the gutter too. But one day you're going to find that joy. You're going to find the magic. You're going to find the peace. You're going to find a new relationship. You're going to see your child grow up in front of your eyes. You're going to get a new job. You're going to recreate your life as a result of your disability or your disease. But nobody ever wants to hear that when they're in the middle of it. And so I really do think that just being a light bearer among the darkness is the only thing that we can do. And this is, I think, the first time we've actually met formally, but we've been connected probably for 7 or 8 or 9 years. And each community needs their light bearers. And every so often, that light is going to get dim. And that light is going to get tired. And the light is going to question, why am I doing this? What's the purpose? And then all of a sudden, again, the universe with divine timing is going to come along with a sign or a symbol and remind you that you're on the right path. And, we're living in a world where so many of us are struggling and filled with grief. Like the last 3 years that we came through, that's going to have generational impacts for the next 3-4 decades. And it's going to take that long to unravel it. But we're all called to learn a lesson. And once we learn that lesson, we're called to share that lesson. whether other people want to hear it or not.
Kevin, thank you so much. This has been such a gift of a conversation. And many times through this conversation, I was thinking, this is exactly why I started this podcast. So thank you so much for continuing to live your life and show up for yourself and sit in the silence or the noise, and keep finding your way to where you are today. And I'm grateful that this has connected us in a deeper way that we can continue to grow from. So thank you for your time. And I look forward to sharing this with everybody.
Well, and thank you for creating this platform and this conversation, because it's not an easy topic. And it's a topic that so many want to run away from, but it's the topic that changes lives. So I appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to today's conversation. More than likes and follows, I just hope that it inspires you to have conversations about life and death with those you love while you still have the chance. If you have an idea for a topic that you'd like me to explore or a guest you think would be great for the show, you can send me a message on Instagram, or you can email me at wearealldyingpodcast@gmail.com.